This week on Quality Digest Live, we talked to Jim Benson about mapping work and navigating life through personal Kanban.
Plus, researchers at Lawrence Livermore National Lab investigate the physics behind the 3D printing of metals. That and more when we come back.
Welcome back to Quality Digest Live for February 5th, 2016. QDL is your weekly look at who and what is making the news in the world of quality. I'm Dirk Ducharme, Editor-in-Chief of Quality Digest.
And I'm Quality Digest publisher Mike Richmond. All right, well, we're going to begin the show this week with an important issue that touches directly or indirectly most industrial sectors. This also is something that affects all of us as consumers too. Report millions of hidden workers used in company supply chains originally appeared on the Spend Matters website, and we linked out to the piece in yesterday's issue of Quality Digest Daily. Obviously, the question about how stuff gets made in today's economy and by whom is a moral and ethical issue of the first order. That's because, as many of us know, going back to my Jersey roots there, that's because, as many of us know, but rarely think about, all that stuff is assembled by many, many hands in many, many nations. And for most purposes, most intensive purposes, they're being really done by slaves. You know, that stuff's being put together by people that are no better than slaves. The report quoted in the article from the International Trade Union Confederation, or the ITUC, finds that there are more than 100 million of these so-called hidden workers who perform some sort of undocumented work within the supply chains of major corporations such as McDonald's and Apple, Coca-Cola, Johnson & Johnson, Nike, and Walmart, to name just a few of the 50 companies examined in this report. The article also cites additional ITUC studies that reveal that 94% of respondents see fair labor rights as a foundation for global trade. More than 90% believe that there should be some more stringent rules in place to hold companies accountable for how workers in the supply chain are treated and paid. And 80% support an increase in minimum wages around the world. So I think clearly there's some widespread support here for change in this area. And we talked about it on the show in the past. You know, we've talked about it. I'm sure a lot of our viewers have as well. Here in the U.S., the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act of 2010 has protocols in place that are meant to uncover abuses in the supply chain, and they prohibit the use of things like conflict minerals, right? Which are minerals that are mined in areas that are under stress or in conflict, yeah. And the money that comes from that is often used to fund, you know, white traffic, slavery, and traffic in slaves, and conflict, wars, terrorism, all sorts of bad things. This new report, though, shines a light on the real extent of the issue, and I think it's pretty clear that there's need for additional action, specifically legislative action, not only here in the U.S., but across the world. And that's what this report is saying, is that there's this growing awareness that these hidden workers, is 116 million, I think is the number that was actually quoted in the report, of hidden workers that in some way, shape, or form are helping these large companies assemble their stuff. And they're not documented, they're not on the payrolls anywhere, but we know they're doing the work, and we know that the suppliers for these companies are hiring these people to do this work. So the question is, can we protect them? Is there a way of legislatively protecting these people and putting some pressure on some of these larger corporations to make sure that the people that help them do their thing in the right way?
Well, I think part of what's going on too is you have, let's say, societal pressure on companies like, you know, Apple and McDonald's and so forth. Because I mean, for instance, when the whole thing with the company in China that was making stuff for Foxconn, right? Well, once that came to Apple's attention, now who knows, maybe they knew all along, who knows, but let's give them the benefit of the doubt. Let's say once it publicly came to their attention in any case, they started doing something about it. And from latest reports, it looks like Foxconn is starting to get their act together, has kind of cleaned up things, made situations better for the workers there. So I think legislation, I think, is important, but I think in today's day and age, particularly when you're talking about vendors outside the United States, how much can your legislation do, right? But social pressure can do a heck of a lot, and I think that's where we're seeing a lot of it coming from.
I think this report like this is valuable, because it does shine a light on it, so we're aware of it. 116 million people, I mean, that's not a small portion of the workforce across the globe, so it's an important issue.
Yep. Okay, so what do you think about going from San Francisco to, I don't know, say Los Angeles in, I don't know, maybe about 30 minutes?
Wow.
And I'm not talking flying. I mean, even if you fly right now, it takes you maybe 45 minutes. And we're not talking by bullet train. We're talking about something that's, I don't know, kind of something in between the two. It's called the Hyperloop. In a Hyperloop, people and freight are propelled in pods through tubes that are maintained at a near vacuum. So there's no air or surface friction. The pods themselves don't touch the sides of the tube. So there's no air or surface friction. So the pods can travel estimated maybe close to the speed of sound. And by the way, a commercial airliner is nowhere near that. Commercial airliners typically flying 550,
right.
Speed of sound 750 miles an hour or so. So we're talking something approaching the speed of sound. And by the way, the energy propulsion for this is low power. It doesn't take a lot of power when you don't have that much friction. So this is all pretty cool. So the Hyperloop is an idea from Elon Musk of Tesla and SpaceX fame, or infamy, depending on how you want to look at it. The idea is to create a system of tubes that connect major cities of less than 900 miles apart. And inside these tubes would run the pods, the vehicles. He threw down the gauntlet a few years ago by creating a competition to come up with a design for the Hyperloop vehicles. Well, beating out a field of more than 100 other teams from around the world at a competition at Texas A&M University, a group of MIT graduate students won the Best Overall Design Award for a vehicle that will ride inside the Hyperloop. Their entry, which is just a prototype, was a 550-pound pod made of aluminum, carbon fiber, and polycarbonate. It uses 2 arrays of 20 neodymium magnets to levitate over the track. So this is kind of a maglev kind of system, if you're familiar with the maglev. A hydraulic braking system clamps onto the track to decelerate the pod at up to 2.5 Gs per SpaceX's requirements. And this is, like I said, just a scaled down prototype. But the first stage, with the first stage done now, the action is now going to shift to fabricating a larger scale final assembly. This has to be done by mid-May. And ideally, it's going to reach a speed in excess of 100 meters per second, which is about 200 miles per hour. And it's going to be tested this summer on a track being built next to the SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne, California. And no, there will be no passengers on board.
I wanted to be that first guy.
So
yeah,
we're just going to stick you inside this tube. Don't worry
about
it. Don't worry about it. Pretty certain brakes work.
We think this works. That's why we're putting you in there.
There you go.
Elon Musk. That's great. That's great stuff. But you know what we were talking about though? I mean, the cutting edge. I mean, this is stuff that's going to be reality. I mean, something like this system's going to be reality.
Well, SpaceX is still doing stuff, and they've had successes and failures. But I mean, I mean, God bless him. Elon Musk, I mean, he puts himself out there. He does some crazy stuff. And look, Tesla was successful.
Yes.
Or is becoming more successful.
It is, yes.
And who knows what's going to spin out of SpaceX or something like the Hyperloop.
You know, we need entrepreneurs like that. We really do. I mean, you need those people to push stuff forward. Great stuff there. Thanks, Dirk. All right. Well, our first guest on the show this week is a longtime Quality Digest contributor who specializes in collaboration and cooperation. His website, personalkanban.com, encapsulates an approach to improvement driven by creating value in addition to maximizing efficiency. Kanban, for any of you not familiar with the concept, was originally developed by Taiichi Ohno at Toyota and has become a central tenet to the Toyota production system. It was originally intended to control logistics within an industrial environment, but really it serves as an outstanding organizational tool for anyone, really anywhere, in the workplace or at home. And there are 2 basic rules to Kanban. First, visualize your work, and second, limit work in progress. So, to find out more about Kanban and to tell us a little bit about a new course he's offering in conjunction with the 5th anniversary of his Shingo Award-winning book titled Personal Kanban, Mapping Work, Navigating Life, we'd like to welcome Jim Benson to the show. Jim, thank you for joining us.
Hi there.
Well, you wrote this very successful book. I just referred to it 5 years ago, and it really kind of represents what you're all about and what you do. So let me ask you, why did you choose to highlight the personal side of Kanban in the title?
Well, so the personal and personal Kanban has kind of a double meaning. The first is that you can use it personally, so taking it out of the industrial environment and into the personal environment. But also the things that are flowing through a personal Kanban are items of personal value. So the tasks that you're working on, the work that you're doing, that sort of thing.
Now, you work with a lot of clients in this space, right? I mean, you've been out there, we were talking about it before the show. And so what kinds of business struggles do you see that are best alleviated really by the Kanban approach to improvement?
Well, kind of one of the first jokes / questions that I will ask the people that I'm working with is, who here needs more work? And everybody will laugh at that because everybody is overloaded. And in knowledge work, when you're overloaded, you don't know. You feel overloaded, but you don't know exactly how much you're overloaded because you don't know what system you have and what capacity that system has. When we're dealing with a Kanban system on a factory floor, we know that we have a certain number of machines and a certain number of people and a certain amount of product that we want to move. And so limiting the work in process there has a very physical, tangible component. For knowledge work, everything's in our heads. Much more difficult to tell who's overloaded and what the impacts of that overload are. So our customers generally have one of or all of these three problems. The individuals in their organization are overloaded. The groups that those individuals belong to are overloaded, and the company itself is overloaded. And what's frustrating is one of the first remedies for that is to limit the amount of work that the company has in process, which often means that they have to take, they might have 30, 70, 100 projects in flight, and we'll tell them things like, you should probably have 8. And the thing is that when you do that, when you limit your work in process, you finish things more quickly, you finish them of greater quality, there's less rework, and you can move on to the next thing. So your throughput shoots through the roof, even though the projects that you're working on at any given time may drastically shrink in number.
But Jim, isn't everybody a great multitasker? I mean, I know I always think I'm a great multitasker, right?
Sure.
I mean, the more I got, the more efficient I am, man. I'm just pounding it out, right? Isn't that true?
That's right. So what I often tell people is that if you want to be mistreated as an undergraduate, go to school at Stanford, because that's where all of the evil psychologists are that completely destroy the undergrads as volunteers and psychological tests. And one of the things that they've put these poor students through time and time again is tests on multitasking. And what they found, I shouldn't say what we found, but what they found is that multitasking isn't something that anyone can actually do. That our brains can't hold more than one complex task in active memory at a time. So when we have multiples, then we run into all sorts of problems. But the other thing is that then when you are doing multiple tasks at a time, you're always remembering the states of all of those tasks, which lowers the amount of processing that your brain is doing on the task that you're actually truly working on, which means that you're not paying attention, you're not focused. And when we're not focused, then we have quality problems. Unfortunately, like that one question could just literally make me sit here and talk for days. So I'll just leave it. Let's say one more sentence, and that's that multitaskers who think that they are good multitaskers have been shown unequivocally by Stanford researchers to not be able to multitask. In fact, people who consider themselves good multitaskers are worse multitaskers than people who do not consider themselves good multitaskers.
Well, they probably should have gone to MIT then.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, Jim, I know
at MIT, people are very good at focusing.
well, this is true. They just kind of divide and conquer their tasks and throw one person at it forever. You've got a really interesting online course that you're offering in a couple of weeks. What's the format and what can people expect to learn from it?
So at Modus Institute, which is our online school, we now have 2 classes launched. The first is how to manage a distributed team, and there's a lot of people out there with distributed teams trying to figure out how to get through that. And the second one, which we're launching on the 18th of February, is a class in personal Kanban. And basically it includes the stuff that's in the book, but then also the things that we've learned over the last 11 years of how people work together, how we estimate, how we plan, how work actually flows through a knowledge work system as opposed to how we wish that it flowed. And the classes themselves come in 3 flavors. You can either just go and watch the videos and be on your merry way, or you can come and you can actually participate in cohorts that have biweekly conversations about what you're learning. What we've learned is that if you discuss what you have learned, you're much more likely not only to retain it, but to act on it. And so we've made that available. And then the third flavor is basically that you can do those two things and engage with Tony Ann and myself for some one-on-one time. So basically some hours of consulting in there as well. But what our goal is nothing short of transforming the modern workplace and letting people who are currently overloaded be able to communicate to themselves and to others what their current workload is, what their actual capacity is, and then people can start to figure out what is really important for us to get done right now, and what's the best way to do that.
Well, Jim Benson, I think that's a noble goal. I think I would appreciate that. I think all of us would to a certain extent. So thank you for that, and thank you for joining us today on Quality Digest Live. Jim, we'll look forward to following your regular columns in Quality Digest going forward. And again, thanks for joining us, Jim. Good luck with the course.
It's always a pleasure. Thanks, guys.
Talk to you soon.
See you. So long. Okay, well, the process of 3D printing in metal has been around for several years. We've talked about it on the show even a few times, and it's even actually being used to manufacture production parts. But there are still a lot of unknowns about the quality, or let's say predicting the quality of parts that come out of the selective laser melting process. So if you aren't familiar with SLM, basically it works like this. It pretty much works like any 3D printing process, except in this case, they lay down a thin layer of powdered metal, and it's put down very precisely, and it's spread across the build area. Then they take a laser or an electron beam to fuse the metal in a pattern based on inputs from a CAD, and then the process is repeated. So a layer of metal, more fusing, layer of metal, more fusing, and basically over time a part is built up layer by layer from the bottom up. So it's kind of like 3D printers you've seen that do it in plastic, except rather than squirting plastic out and curing it with UV or whatever, they're laying down a layer of metal and then just fusing the metal at high temperature and building it up that way. Well, according to researchers at Lawrence Livermore National Lab, even though the method has quickly progressed into a production technology, 3D printing of metal parts for industries such as aerospace and healthcare, really critical parts, is hampered by really a lack of confidence in the finished parts. So Lawrence Livermore is developing a science-based understanding of the process. And I think what they mean by that is a lot of it right now is trial and error, and really understanding how the various components work and the physics behind it is something that's been lacking. So in a paper published in the January edition of Applied Physics Reviews, researchers describe two physics-based models for the selective laser melting process. And the first one is the powder model, which is, this addresses really the formation and the evolution and the solidification of the melt pool. Now, the melt pool, as it sounds like, this is where the laser or the electron beam hits the powdered metal and it melts it and creates a little bit of a pool. Well, that pool has to be really controlled. So in order to understand how that pool is formed and the characteristics of it, you have to understand how laser power and the speed of the beam size and the beam shape affect different types of metals. And this could all be used to help develop parameters for new materials. The second model is the part scale model, which simulates the 3D printing of full-scale parts. And it calculates the effects of stress and heat arising from a given type of metal, and also the laser process parameters. This research could help improve predictions of deformation and stresses during printing. If you think about it, I mean, you're heating something up, and with 3D printing, as with anything, as you heat parts and they cool, you get stresses, you get deformation, warping, and this is obviously going to give you a part that you're not looking for, and this could actually lead to part failure. This model could also help improve part quality by eliminating much of the guesswork and the iteration that's involved in creating new parts. The way this might work, according to Bob Ferencz, Lawrence Livermore's division leader for the computational engineering, is that if there is warping, and the warping is going to be consistent, you would assume, let me back up a little bit. If you're controlling the speed of the beam and the heat of the beam, if you're controlling the melt pool, if you're controlling the powder metal and all that, if everything is controlled and understood, then any warpage and any stress should be consistent from make to make. So if you can understand the warp and it's consistent, you can kind of do an anti-warp. So you target your geometry so that it will warp into shape as opposed to warping out of shape, because the warp is
consistent.
It's consistent.
Right.
So you understand what it is.
Cool.
So rather than having multiple iterations in order to get to the part you want, you can model it and have a much better understanding of what's going to happen and alter your CAD model to create a piece that's going to come out either exactly what you're thinking of or at least much closer than it has in the past. So according to the researchers, combining the physics models and also data mining, what's gone on in the past, and uncertainty analysis could optimize metal parts without cost of multiple experiments and aid in more widespread adoption of metal 3D printing. So interesting stuff. So this is really,
cool.
it's really understanding the process. You got to do it in order to be able to predict, and that's what they're trying to do, is predict what's going to happen with these parts before they just make multiple parts and finally get it right.
Right.
So it basically, I think what it does is it speeds up the development process more than anything. So
That's great. Good stuff.
Cool stuff. Well, oh wow, it's me again. We're what 4 or 5 months from the release of ISO 9001 2015. It was October, wasn't it?
Was September, October of last year.
Yeah,
so
okay.
we're about 4 or 5 months into 2015.
Okay, and I think it's safe to say that people are still trying to get a feel for, I don't know, among other things, who is responsible for what within the ISO 9001 2015 process, and particularly top management, who, according to the new version of the standard, are, quote, accountable for the quality management system. And what does that mean anyway? What is accountability? And what, if any, changes is that accountability going to mean for leadership? So here to discuss that with us is Chad Kymal of Omnex. Hi, Chad.
Hi, Dirk. How are you?
Oh, pretty good. How are you? Caught you off guard there. Sorry about that. Caught me off guard. So let's just really briefly, how do you feel expectations for management is different in ISO 9001 2015 than it was from ISO 9001 2008?
Well, if you look at 2008, there was a 5.1 management commitment, and top management didn't really have to, they were not accountable, for the quality management system's effectiveness. They actually could do it by, helping write the quality policy, being in the management review, and communicating the importance of meeting customer and regulatory requirements. But in ISO 9001 2015, the leadership starts out by saying top management is accountable for the effectiveness of the quality management system. It says more than that. But to summarize, so they are accountable. In the end of the day, they have to be responsible and accountable for the effectiveness. And I like the new standard, I have to say.
Okay, hey, Chad.
Many different places, it's looking for effectiveness, results of outcomes.
And Chad, just before we continue, can you check to see if your video camera's turned on there?
I was wondering myself.
That way we can.
That's. Oh, there it is.
Hey, that's technology for you.
Yeah, that's always. Well, Chad, while you're doing that, I want to ask you this. Maybe we can multitask. We're just talking about this. But I want to ask you about integration, because this is a key thing you were talking about in your article that I think also is important, is this idea that ISO 9001 2015, ISO 14001 2015, and the new standard that evolved out of OSHA, Occupational Health and Safety, which is ISO 45001. All these really, they're intended to kind of work together in a certain way. So how do you integrate those things when you look at managing your management system?
As you all know, I wrote an article. I wrote a book. Oh, there it is. Let me show myself properly here.
There we go.
Great. So, I wrote this book for ASQ last year, which is, by the way, doing wonderfully well. And the timing was very perfect in terms of people trying to move towards integrated management systems. And lo and behold, what happened? The standards are all adopting a high-level structure, and ISO 9001 and 14001 and 45001, which is all the new I 18001, are all suddenly very similar. So all of them have these words. Let me just pick up the standard and read you the words that's in every one of those standards. And in leadership, it says, integration of the quality management system requirements or environmental management system requirements or health and safety management requirements, depending on your standard, and says into the organization's business processes. So de facto, the high-level structure is asking for integrated management systems. So I thought this is such a very important that companies around the world should know that the standard itself is asking leadership to integrate the requirements into one set of business processes, which is one of the parts of integrated management systems. If you read the book, I mentioned they should do integrated risk and also integrated audits. But definitely a very important ingredient is integrated business processes.
Well, if we kind of take those two things we were just talking about, accountability and this integration across multiple standards, if your company has multiple standards, how is this going to affect leadership? Is this really changing the way top management is controlling or leading the QMS effort within the company?
Yes. Starts out with this word, top management is accountable for the QMS. And those are very important words. The second thing it tells us that the standard also says is they have to support subordinates. They have to really be helping subordinates, try to meet the effectiveness of the quality management system. Suddenly they have a very important role as both a promoter of effectiveness and also so they have to take the role of promoting risk-based thinking, process approach, and of course also, ensuring the effectiveness of the quality management system. No longer can they say, talk to my VP of quality or director of quality when asked pertinent high-level questions regarding the management system. So I think things have changed.
So the idea of accountability, perhaps, even though the standard doesn't really spell it out, the word accountability is fairly pointed, and maybe what it's saying, perhaps, is that kind of the buck stops there. If something is going wrong with your QMS, it is going to be top management who's going to be held responsible, or should be held responsible in any case. Would you agree with that?
I don't think they'll get if something doesn't work well, it's not that they're going to get a non-conformance. It's if they don't really know how well the QMS is performing, if they don't understand the process approach, or even the process, let's say they have a process map, they don't know it, or they don't know where customer satisfaction stands, or or they don't have, let's say, really countermeasures planned or action plan to improve things aren't working well. And if they look like they just don't have the wherewithal, then there's a problem. They really haven't really understood their role, and they're not being accountable for the quality management system or environmental management system or the health and safety management system. The standards now for all three of those have squarely placed it in top management's lap.
Okay. So if I got to point out that next week we're actually going to be talking a lot more about the role of top management in the new 2015 standards. It's going to be Omnex and Quality Digest. I'm going to be host, and Chad is is going to be the knowledge expert. And the name of the webinar is Learn About Expanding the Role of Top Management in the 2015 Standards, which occurs on Thursday, February 11th, 2016 at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. And as I said, Chad will be there to lead it, and I'll be there to make them look good.
That's right.
So Chad, thanks for joining us this afternoon, and we'll be seeing you next Tuesday at the webinar.
Yes, and it was great talking to you guys, and talk to you again soon.
Okay, thanks, Chad.
Thanks, Chad. Have a great weekend. Yeah, it's going to be a good webinar, Dirk. You and Chad have done a few of these together over the past couple of months, year or so. So this will be a good one. Yeah, I think it's an important issue. I think a lot of you out there have expressed questions. A lot of our users of the standards and how these standards work together and how management.
Well, and accountability is. I was just discussing this with one of the members of the TAG. Is accountability is somewhat of a loaded term, and she was saying that she thinks ISO, the developers of the standard, put that word in there on purpose, deliberately to make a loaded term. I mean, you could have said responsible, but accountable and responsible, kind of two different things.
A little different context.
A little different context, and I think that word has caught some people's attention, and now they're kind of wondering, oh, what does this mean?
Yeah. So anyway, tune in for that. Again, it's next Thursday, 6 days from now. It's the 11th of February, and again, you'll see right there the role of leadership in ISO 9001 2015. Excuse me, and ISO 14000 2015. Webinar, and it's going to be on Thursday the 11th at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. Dirk and Chad, keep an eye on your email as always for information about that. Also, there's a link in Chad's article down below. Chad's article is on this landing page, so you can read Chad's article, which ran yesterday in Quality Digest Daily, and link out to register for the webinar right there. So
there you go.
Check it out.
Well, that is our show for today. We thank all of you for joining us.
Thanks, Jim Benson, too, for coming along.
I'm sorry about that. Yeah, Jim, thanks for joining us. CEO of Modus Cooperendi, I believe is what it's called, and also the author of Personal Kanban. Great book, by the way. We've used it here in the office. It's well written and it's interesting. Yeah, it is. It's really interesting. So suggest that you go out there and look that up on, I imagine you can find it on Amazon. Personal Kanban by Jim Benson. Just a shameless plug for him there. Okay. Well, thanks to all of you for joining us, and we will see you next week.
That's right. Have a great weekend.
So,
bye.
Fire!